Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Katsuyama Japan. Today we're putting the finishing touches on the carnivore loop here on the back half of our park before we say goodbye for now and move on to updating another park in our Jurassic World Evolution 3 campaign. We've got two incredible species making their return today, the Yutyrannus and the Qianzhousaurus. Qianzhousaurus has always been one of my personal favorites in the game, but I have to admit the habitat we built for Yutyrannus has quickly made it one of my favorite dinosaurs to just sit back and watch. We've got a lot to finish up, so let's not waste any time and start rebuilding for both these animals' homes in Jurassic World Evolution 3. One thing we finally checked off the list was giving this park an official name. It actually took me a while because nothing I came up with really fit the atmosphere I was going for. I wanted something that felt authentic to the region while still sounding like a real-world dinosaur attraction. In the end, I landed on Hokuriku Prehistoric Park, and I think it captures the identity of the park I'm going for. To help bring that theme to life, I've also started adding park signs throughout the park. You won't see those right away, but at the end of the episode, we'll take a look around and you'll notice those little details that help make this park feel much more believable. It'll also be a great chance for us to see the Yutyrannus and the Qianzhousaurus setting into their brand new habitats as we wrap up this section of the park. One thing you'll probably notice if you've watched this series is I don't use viewing galleries very often. Most of the time, they're just not necessary because I can create way more natural viewing guest areas with paths and overlooks or fencing. But for these two exhibits, I felt like each species deserved its own dedicated viewing experience, so both the Yutyrannus and the Qianzhousaurus are getting viewing galleries. For Yutyrannus, we're using a remote viewing gallery, which means we first need to build the entrance facility. Instead of designing it like we've done in previous parks, I wanted to try building something a little bit different. Rather than feeling like another standalone building dropped into the landscape, I wanted it to look faux natural, as if the terrain was there first and this structure was attempting to be built around it. To create this effect, we're surrounding the structure with plenty of rock work and natural wood elements, so the building almost disappears into the environment, but not perfectly. The goal isn't for the guests to stand here and watch the Yutyrannus directly. There are much better viewing opportunities elsewhere in the habitat. This entrance simply serves as the access point for the remote gallery. But that doesn't stop me from getting carried away and watching guests walk around it. I placed the entrance towards the back of the structure so guests naturally walk around the building before entering. It's a small detail, but those kind of choices make this park feel more believable to me. Instead of every facility facing the main path at the most convenient way possible, we can encourage our guests to get around there and get some steps in. We can also see them get a little closer to these animals and off the main loop. That's really been the philosophy behind rebuilding a lot of these enclosures and making them feel less like a game and more like a real wildlife park that just happens to house dinosaurs. It really is satisfying to finally see this side of the park come together, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little bittersweet. These were the last two species we needed to bring back, which means, for now at least, our work here at the Hokuriku Prehistoric Park is finished. Looking back at where this park started compared to where it is now, I am a lot happier with the overall design. The original version had simply become too crowded, too complex. We were sitting at 100% complexity, which made it difficult to add anything new or really let the habitats breathe. Now, we brought all that down to 61%, and I think the difference speaks for itself. The park feels more open, the guest areas are more believable, the habitats feel larger and more natural, and each species has room to stand out instead of competing for space. Except for the Deinonychus. They are still a little cramped for space, but not enough to break out of their enclosure we built 2 weeks ago. Of course, this isn't really goodbye. One thing that I wanted to plan during this rebuild was the future. Hokuriku Prehistoric Park has naturally become a carnivore-focused destination. That was the intention when they started this park. And with Frontier continuing to add new species to Jurassic World Evolution 3, I'm sure we'll find ourselves back here before too long. In fact, I've intentionally left room behind this section of the park so we have somewhere to expand without having to redesign everything all over again. Hopefully that decision future me will appreciate. And I'd love to hear what you think. If there are dinosaurs you'd like to see added to Jurassic World Evolution 3, or species you feel like would fit the theme of this park particularly well, let me know down in the comments. I've always enjoyed reading suggestions, and a lot of the ideas of these parks come from conversations with you or other people. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to support the channel, the easiest way to do that is by hitting that like button. It really helps these videos reach more Jurassic fans. And if you don't want to miss anything that's coming up next, be sure to hit that subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got plenty more projects ahead as we continue updating our campaign parks, and we'll be jumping into Jurassic World Evolution 3's Rebirth expansion more to continue preparing Ile Saint-Hubert for everything that we have going forward. There are some really exciting builds coming up, and I can't wait to share those with you. One thing I really like about having both Yutyrannus and Qianzhousaurus in the same park is that while they never actually live together, they almost feel like two different chapters of the evolution of Asian apex predators. Yutyrannus lived much earlier, around 125 million years ago during the early Cretaceous. It was one of the first truly large-ish tyrannosaurids, and despite its size, it was covered in a coat of primitive feathers. It was built in a world that was cooler and more heavily forested than many people picture what they think of for dinosaurs. We could have used some snow here, but I don't have a great way of incorporating the snow into this park. But with Yutyrannus' long legs, strong arms, and the lighter build, it was probably an active predator capable of chasing down large herbivores through dense woods. Fast forward around 60 million years, and you get Qianzhousaurus. And by this point, tyrannosaurids had changed dramatically. Qianzhousaurus belonged to a group of tyrannosaurs that evolved into a slightly different hunter. Instead of the big crushing skulls of T-Rex, Qianzhousaurus had an incredibly long, narrow snout, which earned the nickname Pinocchio Rex. Rather than relying purely on brute force, scientists think that the long skull may have helped it target smaller, faster prey or hunt in a slightly different way than the larger tyrannosaurs that came later. That's one of the reasons I like displaying these two species together. They're both large carnivores from Asia, but they represent two completely different stages of tyrannosaur evolution. Yutyrannus shows where the family was headed, and a feathered predator still carrying some primitive traits, while Qianzhousaurus showed how specialized certain tyrannosaurs can become as they evolved over time. If these two somehow shared the same ecosystem, they probably would have competed for territory and food. That's one of the big reasons that we have the bridge barrier between them. They also don't generally like each other, even though their environment needs are very similar for this park, which makes it a nice pairing for each of them to be in a similar location here. It doesn't feel like our territories are dramatically, or our environments are dramatically different here. For Qianzhousaurus, we're actually going to reuse the viewing gallery design we built a couple weeks ago for Osteoraptor. I really liked how that one turned out, and since we want to keep some cohesion throughout the park, it makes sense to carry some architectural designs over here. Real parks reuse building designs all the time, and I think that consistently helps make the whole park feel a little bit more believable. I do have to make a few changes to make it fit this enclosure a little better. We'll remove the wraparound deck, update the landscaping, and of course swap out the signage so guests know they're looking at a Qianzhousaurus instead of the Osteoraptor. Other than those tweaks though, the overall design is going to stay pretty close to the original because I think it complements the habitat really well. We just need a new deck for our guests to see the Qianzhousaurus that blends a little better into the path here. If you like seeing these galleries come together from the ground up, be sure to check out that episode from a couple weeks ago. That's the one where we built the Osteoraptor habitat along with the new home for the Guanlong and the Deinonychus. I go through the entire design process in that video, so if you're looking for inspiration for your own park, it's definitely worth checking out. We've just got a few finishing touches here before we can officially call this habitat complete. I always think that it's small details that really bring a build together, so we're going to spend a little more time dressing up the viewing deck and the bridge leading up to this move before moving on. And since this enclosure is much more open than the others in this park, I also wanted to hide the feeders a little bit better. I'm using the elephant grass around them so they blend naturally into the environment instead of immediately catching your eye. In a real wildlife park, you wouldn't naturally find the feeder stations to be the first thing that guests notice, and I think concealing them helps preserve the illusion that these animals are living in a more natural habitat. Although to be fair, I just was at a zoo and they had a carcass feeder right in front of everyone, so sometimes I guess it's not a big deal. And I actually didn't do that for the Guanlong enclosure that we built a few weeks ago. Probably should have. That said, I don't think guests really can see the goat feeder from any of the viewing areas, so it's probably not a big deal. With that, I think it's time to close the book on Hokuriku Prehistoric Park, at least for now. It's been a lot of fun coming back and completely reimagining this park, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. We now have a much more realistic layout, room to grow in the future, and a park that really embraces its identity as a carnivore destination. As for what's next, I'm still deciding where we're headed. We could be returning to the Sichuan Basin, we could head to the Azores, we could make a stop in Hawaii. Each one has plenty of projects waiting, so if there's one you'd like to see, let me know down in the comments. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the game, and I will see you on the next build.